Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Our theme is I'm great at selling. All I need is a few good leads. But the problem right now is the leads I'm getting are terrible. The leads are terrible. Now, what I need are the Glengarry leads. That comes from the movie Glengarry, Glen Ross. Now, these are fantastic leads, but they're somewhat mythical leads. And one thing we're going to explore is, can they be a substitute for hard work? And should we wait for the Glengarry leads, or should we do something right now? And is that all we really need for success, are these Glengarry leads? We're going to take a journey into the seller's mindset today, into our mindset. So I ask you, are you ready? Are you ready? Because here we go. Now, looking ahead to the very end of today's webinar, we're going to raise an important issue about the customer who's bound and determined to descend into the abyss. And are we helping them? Now, this is something we're going to discuss at the end of today's webinar. To begin, we return to an important issue, the tyranny of the or, the tyranny of the or. This idea was popularized in the book Built to Last, and it describes an important success habit of companies that do very well. They overcome the tyranny of the or. So the idea of the tyranny of the or is it's a false alternative. In this case, for a salesperson, should I go after those Glengarry leads, those warm, ready to close leads, or should I do real business development in the sense of, unpredictability? The idea that's brought out in this book, Built to Last, is this is a false alternative, that great companies that last a long time, they have discovered that although it's the shortest and easiest path to go for the Glengarry leads, like, somebody calls and says, hey, Andy, can I buy from you today? What we usually need is an and. It's not one or the other. We need to meld. We need some of each. So we do need to do some business development, because usually if we just wait for what comes in across the transom, we don't hit all of our objectives. Now, a great way to self-generate leads and fill the business development pipeline with powerful opportunity is by taking advantage of the magic moment of access. What is the magic moment of access? You've met all of the client's needs, you're in communication, you confirm they're delighted and they have no other needs, and now you have a magic moment of access. Holy cow, we're actually talking with or visiting somebody. And what can you do in this magic moment? Well, if they've been cherry picking you, if they've put you into a pigeonhole, if they've treated us like this, we could break the pigeonhole and say, hey, you've been buying A, how about B? But another thing we could do in this moment is ask for a warm introduction to somebody who could buy our product. Just as a comment, I built this business many years ago from one warm introduction, and I did a good enough job, and that led to more introductions. So introductions are very, very powerful. With a strong introduction, you are on the way to being seen as a brand. You, me, salespeople in general are seen as a brand. And even stronger than that, you could be on the way to being seen as the incumbent. So if there is no incumbent, if it's a first buy and somebody comes in on a warm introduction, aren't they the one that's going to have like incumbency status? Now, why do we focus on this magic moment of access? It's because so many salespeople have commented they're very busy. They don't have time to do business development. And the magic moment of access, it doesn't take a long time, right? And all you have to do is extend the conversation you're already in. I have a client of professionals. A client of mine is a professional firm. So think accountants, lawyers, people like that. And they were having trouble even with this magic moment of access to overcome the tyranny of the or. So this is a report from one of the practitioners. I've started working 30 minutes earlier on Mondays, and I could couple it with my typical weekly planning to strategize potential magic moments of access. Now, the reason why this is important is if you know you're going to be talking to somebody and you might have a magic moment of access, you want to be thoughtful about, like, who do I want to be introduced to? Who do I want them to introduce me to? So if you're a first connection with somebody, you could look at their LinkedIn connections and say, oh, I want to meet Joe at this company and Jane at that company, and prepare for the conversation. Now, what makes this hard for us to do is the buyer's job. Very often, if the buyer grants an audience, it's to determine, can they get a lower price than they're currently buying at? This is what causes us as salespeople to say, oh, the leads are terrible. All they want is the best price. And sometimes it's the reason why we don't even pursue an opportunity. But are the leads really terrible, or could we be contributing to the problem? You know, often the price buyer is stuck, right? They're happy with where they are. They're buying on a model they understand. You know, $2 is less than $3. Our job as salespeople is to take them on a journey of exploration to become a value buyer. The question we need to ask ourselves is, are we doing a good job of that? Are we doing a good job? So the buyer has a job. His or her job is to turn everything into a commodity. It ain't personal. That's their job. Turns out we have a job too. Our job is to turn our offer into a brand so that we could earn the right to branded profitable business. That's business that we want. There are three types of brands that we could sell: a company brand, an offer brand, or a salesperson brand. Now, the company brand, a well-known company brand like IBM. Hey, you know the saying, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. Then you have the offer brand, like Hershey Kisses or Windows 10 as a product. That's a offer brand. And then there's the salesperson brand. Hey, that's us. What is our brand? A key question we need to answer is, are we following the offer company brand, and or are we a brand ourselves? Kind of like a chicken or an egg kind of a question, isn't it? Here's some follow-up questions. What makes us more valuable to a company that employs us? If we're just following the offer or company brand, or if we're the brand and we can initiate and bring in more customers, doesn't that pay better and give us more security? These are important reasons to create a personal brand. Now, this is a review from a 1-minute review from last session. When I was on Hawaii once, on the Big Island, it was commented that there are 14 weather zones, or climate zones rather, and Hawaii has 10 of them. So it's one of the most diverse places on Earth from a climate point of view. And it made me think that we need to be very diverse as salespeople. Here are some of the things that have to go into our personal brand. We need to be authentic, credible, humble, have integrity, be seen as the idea person, a consultant, somebody who gets things done, a trusted advisor, bold, someone who leads the customer into the future. We're going to focus on this and come back to it. Fun. We're going to focus in on this leads customer into the future idea relative to how do you turn something into a Glengarry lead. You might want, as a takeaway, take a snapshot of this screen. You might find it helpful to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you on each of these different elements of your brand? By the way, maybe I missed something. I don't know everything. I once showed this to somebody and they said, what about memorable? They wanted to add memorable as another criteria. So what kind of brand do you have? What's in your brand? Let's focus in on this one for leading the prospect into the future. And how do you turn what may look like a commodity opportunity into a true Glengarry lead? To do this, you have to overcome the innovator's dilemma, which is described in this book called The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. As I understand it, the basic thesis of the book is this: in times of change, including rapid technological change, if you follow the classic marketing method, it leads to bankruptcy. What? That's crazy, isn't it? So what's the classic marketing method? You ask people what they need, you deliver what they need, and then they reward you with business. But in a time of change, this leads to bankruptcy. What do we mean? Well, the major example I remember from the book is there was a lot of a change in the disk drives and the floppy disks, the removable floppy disk business. So in the 1960s, they had for these IBM mainframes big 13 by 13 floppy drives. And when the producers of the floppies would ask the mainframe people like IBM, what do you want? You know, using the marketing method, right? They would respond, well, pack more data onto a floppy and make it cheaper and make it faster. And so the floppy manufacturers did just that, and they went bankrupt. Why? Because in a time of change, there were new floppies needed. It turned out the mini computers needed 7-inch floppies. And believe it or not, the book claims that the same thing happened when they went down to personal towers with, if you remember, 5 1/4 and then 3 1/2. Each successive generation went bankrupt because they asked the customer, what do you need? When you're a trusted advisor, one of the big payoffs is they give you inside information and they tell you what they need. However, that's only half of the equation of being a trusted advisor. The other half of the equation is knowing the future, or rather, having a keen insight into the future and teaching your customer what they need to do. Another way to talk about this is to talk about the types of knowledge. Type 1 is what your customer knows. Type 2 is what they know they don't know. And type 3 is what they don't realize they don't know. Once you're connected with somebody, or to create a connection, type 3 knowledge, showing them the future, that should get you access. That should get you powerful business. Wait a second, you say. I'm dealing with a price buyer. All he or she cares about is best price. They don't care about the future. You might be right. And that's why we sometimes have to escalate and go to a higher level decision maker, CEO, owner, top exec, because they do care about the future. They are looking down the road. And among other things, they can leverage risk over several accounting periods, whereas a buyer may not be able to do that. Now, a warm intro from a big fan is usually your best way of building the pipeline, your best option to self-generate leads. It's obviously not your only one. Maybe your next best is joining a networking group. So just a quick review here. I could think of one client I have, I'm still doing business with 12 years later, and I got to know them through a networking group. Something else that I have found is very valuable, which I commend to you, and we'll have another slide on in a moment, is having target accounts you want to sell and sending them snail mail packages with notes. There'll be more about this on the next slide. Using your LinkedIn effectively. I think I have about 7,700 LinkedIn connections. Hard work, right? It's hard work to do all this stuff. The one thing I do is send very tailored messaging out to people I want to meet, and I try to attach a link to a testimonial case history for like experience to show I worked in that space. E-letters. I have a list of about 9,000 decision makers, and every couple of weeks they get an e-letter from me with some new ideas. Now, this is really probably my second most important way of getting leads, but I put it down to the bottom because not everybody could do it. But to try to hold yourself out as an expert, for instance, I have a book, Innovate Now. This webinar, I do webinars every month. I publish articles, or I have articles published. I just had another one published in Forbes. So if that's something that makes sense for you, I would actually elevate this to number 2, but I put it further down the list. And finally, cold calling, to me, is the least valuable. But if you don't have any of these other things, it might be all that you have left. So you have lots of ways to build your pipeline, right? Let's take a minute at this personal touch issue. So old, it's new. You know, last year was a tough year. It turned out to be a pretty good year for us. It was our 3rd best year. At the start of this year, we had 330 opportunities we were working in the pipeline. About 28 of them committed they may do business. And these were all people who got a series of snail mails from us last year. So we were working this all through last year. And so far this year, we have about 8 new clients. So selling's a lot of work. I don't want you to think for 1 minute that this is easy stuff. But you could create your own Glengarry needs. So you might want to stop for a moment and ask yourself, who can I send a note to? You know, somebody, not that you're talking to, that you met with, that you got to, but somebody you want to meet. It's a fantastic way to get appointments. And then ask yourself, do you offer an adventure? Is that part of your brand? Very often we hear folks talking about customer experience. An important part of customer experience is, are we responsive? Are we polite? But do you take your customers on an adventure of discovery? How does your selling affect their emotions? Are they excited to talk to you? Do you think before a meeting, how do you want a prospect to feel about this interaction? Are you bringing them type 3 knowledge? Are you telling riveting stories? Does the buyer see you as a guide to the unknown? Do you give them test drives? Let's look at a case history of bold behavior leading into the future, being the idea person that took a substantial effort and created a Glengarry lead. Let's take a quick look at it. This is a story of pursuing a whale, personal story, a 3-year adventure to discovering the must-haves. It's a large company. My contact is the CEO. There are 30 salespeople to train. In year 2, they seemed ready to act, but then they made an acquisition, and it was all hands on deck, and they couldn't do the training. Could you imagine somebody made an acquisition without asking my permission? In year 3, the VP of sales asked the CEO for sales training. Now they were ready to do something. Now, before quoting, kind of like as a committed position, I said, look, we call that a PIK, a payment in kind. I really need to talk to everybody who's involved in this decision, particularly the VP of sales. And that was agreed to, and I spoke to the VP of sales. And then, based on the interviews, I submitted a proposal. The feedback was pretty good. But then about 3 weeks ago, I got feedback. Listen, I just want you to know we've invited other people to bid, including a brand name national training company, somebody we've worked with in the past. And also, by the way, you may have heard the expression, they said, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. So now it's time to do a pre-mortem. The pre-mortem comes from the book Super Forecasting by Tetlock and Gardner. It's a way of looking into the future. And, you know, a post-mortem is something we do after we lose the business, but a pre-mortem is something we do when we're still in the game, when it's still a possibility. And we ask ourselves this question, even though we think we're going to close, why will we never close this deal? And at this level, we know it's because nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. We have what we call the theory of the glasses. There are invisible glasses on a prospect's table, and each glass stands for a different decision criteria. If we do a good job of engaging, we learn the names of the glasses. We learn what's important to them. So in a strong sales process, we discover these glasses, the must-haves. Now, steps 1 to 7, you set up the serious conversation so they're willing to share with us. Step 8 to 12 is fact-finding. We discover the must-haves. And once we discover the must-haves, then we can determine, is there a fit, and try to convince the prospect we have a fit and close. So once we know the names of the glasses, which are the decision criteria, then we can start working on filling the glasses, which is proving the case. So as I look at this pre-mortem, this Tetlock pre-mortem, why else won't I close it? You know, I'm thinking to myself, I don't believe, based on experience, this national company can deliver the results we do or the experience. And so they are, at this point, they've set the standards too low so that the national company can meet them, right? So the thing to do now is to add a glass. And we all need to do this in our selling. We have to determine, first, is there a fit? But then are we differentiated? If we're not differentiated, we need to add a glass to the decision-making criteria. What we want to do is move the conversation to uncontested space, or if you will, in the popular lingo, a blue ocean. So 10 days before due date, I sent out an email saying, I just want to make sure we know what the criteria are here for the decision. Core value alignment, track record for success, customization, older behavior, theory, powerful theory persuasion, creates trusted advisor relationships, strong-looking KPIs, key performance indicators, motivating, practical, coaches the team through change, teaches the sales call, taught by somebody who practices what is preached, teaches how to be the brand, which we talked about today. Now, the things that I'm putting in red here, these are criteria which I was pretty certain, based on experience, the national brand couldn't deliver this. Oh my gosh, now I got radio silence. I made my presentation. I get to give it time to wait. I just want you to know I'm no different than anybody else. I sweat plenty in that period when I'm waiting. What happened? 2 weeks ago, I heard from them and they booked a meeting. Last Thursday, I got the PO. I edged out the national company. How? With the criteria. Well, the must-haves. Well, we all know that Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're almost at the end of today's presentation. You might want to think for a moment about your takeaways, if any, from today's presentation. So are the leads really that terrible? Is it really true that all we need is a few good leads? Are we generating enough leads? So here's a last thought, which I raised at the beginning. Let's say the customer is about to make a descent into the abyss. They were at the top of the hill. They were about to make the right decision, and now they go for the lowest price. Are you helping them at this point? Are you helping them? This is our theme in our next seminar on July 6th at 11 a.m., avoiding the unnecessary round trip to the selling abyss. So step one, the client is so near the right decision, and now they make the wrong decision, and they go for cheap, and you know they're going to go cheap. And what happens when they get cheap? It's like they go to a ghost town where there's tumbleweed. It's a painful place. That's where the customer is going to go if they make a bad decision, right? And when they realize they've made a bad decision, what do? They have to climb back up the hill to quality, to our offer. And that's a very painful trip to make, right? And then in the end, they're in the best place. They finally came back to quality, to the best solution, to the best offer. But was the painful journey necessary? And if we care about the prospect, could we help prevent it? This is our theme on July 6th at 11 a.m., avoiding the painful round trip to the inferno. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, send an email to me at andy@urgencybasedselling.net or go to our website, www.urgencybasedselling.net. Thanks. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye now.